He never thought much about the way money moved through his hands. It came in quietly, like a tide that rose every month, and just as quietly it slipped away. Paychecks arrived, bills disappeared, and the rest scattered across small pleasures, coffee, rides, takeout, a new gadget that promised efficiency but delivered clutter. At the end of each month, there was always that familiar thought. Where did it all go? Most people live this way. They work, they earn, they spend, they repeat. Yet somewhere between survival and satisfaction, they lose track of direction. Money isn't just currency. It's a reflection of choices, values, and the quiet story of one's life. The way a person spends the way they live, impulsively or intentionally, carelessly or consciously. The truth is, budgeting doesn't begin with numbers. It begins with awareness. And awareness is uncomfortable. It asks a person to pause, to confront habits, to admit that maybe it's not the paycheck that's small, but the discipline that's weak. He used to think budgeting was only for those struggling, people barely making it, people with debt. But in time, he realized that the richest people he knew budgeted more strictly than anyone else. Because budgeting isn't about poverty. It's about power. The power to decide rather than drift. The power to plan rather than hope. The mentor who taught him this never raised his voice. He spoke calmly, as if explaining something simple. Most people, he said, don't plan to fail. They just fail to plan. And money, it rewards clarity. That sentence lingered. Because clarity doesn't come from earning more. It comes from knowing what enough looks like. There's a strange pride people carry when they say, I don't like budgets. They call it freedom. But what they really mean is avoidance. Freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the presence of self-control. He learned that slowly. The first time he wrote down every expense, he felt exposed. Every small indulgence stared back at him from the page like a confession. But there was something powerful about that honesty. For the first time, his money had a shape. His life had a mirror. Most people fear budgeting because they think it takes joy away. In reality, it takes anxiety away. It replaces uncertainty with structure. It turns guilt into intention. Imagine two kinds of mornings. In the first, a man wakes up already stressed, his phone buzzing with payment reminders and overdue balances. In the second, another man wakes up knowing every dollar in his account has a destination. Rent, food, savings, joy. Same income, different control. The difference isn't luck. It's planning. Budgeting is emotional work disguised as math. It requires humility, patience, and an acceptance of limits. It asks, what do you really value? Because when you see where your money goes, you see who you are. There's a story about a young professional who earned well but saved nothing. Every time his paycheck arrived, he celebrated. I deserve it, he'd say. But the celebration never ended. Years passed, and the same pattern repeated. Excitement, indulgence, emptiness, regret. One day, after an emergency expense left him borrowing from friends, he finally faced the truth. It wasn't that life was unfair. It was that he'd been unprepared. That night, he sat down with a notebook and wrote 3 columns: needs, wants, goals. The first 2 were easy: rent, food, transport. Then came wants, the endless list that drained his peace. Take-out clothes, subscriptions, small luxuries that added up. But when he reached goals, he hesitated. He realized he hadn't thought about goals in years. Saving for what? Building what? Preparing for whom? That pause was the beginning of change. Because clarity about money starts with purpose. Without purpose, every budget collapses. Without purpose, money leaks through the cracks of distraction. The next day, he created his first simple plan. 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings. He failed the first month, then the second. But by the third, something shifted. Every decision began to feel intentional. The noise of impulse quieted. His future started to feel closer, not as a dream, but as a direction. Budgeting didn't make him rich overnight. It made him aware. And awareness, in time, became wealth. People often say, I'll start when I earn more. But earning more doesn't fix what spending carelessly breaks. If you can't manage 100, you can't manage 1,000. If you can't plan for today, tomorrow will always be chaos. The mentor once told him, money magnifies who you are. If you're disciplined, it amplifies your strength. If you're careless, it multiplies your weakness. That truth cuts deep, because the goal of budgeting isn't to restrict pleasure, it's to structure it, to give joy its rightful place among priorities. Think of a musician. Before he plays, he tunes his instrument. The strings must be aligned, the rhythm balanced. Only then does music emerge. Budgeting is no different. It's the tuning of one's financial life. Without it, even success sounds like noise. There's also something spiritual about budgeting. It teaches patience in a world of urgency. It rewards consistency more than brilliance. It reminds us that slow progress is still progress. When he first began budgeting seriously, he noticed how his mindset changed. Spending money stopped feeling like relief. Saving began feeling like strength. There was pride in restraint, not the pride of arrogance, but of self-mastery. Every time he said no to something unnecessary, he was saying yes to something greater, his future, his peace, his control. Discipline has a quiet beauty. It's not glamorous. No one applauds you for skipping a purchase or tracking expenses. But the real victories in life are often silent, the ones that build foundations rather than attention. And one day, when emergencies come, and they always do, discipline speaks louder than panic. The savings account that once looked small suddenly feels like safety. The plan that once felt tedious now feels like power. In the stillness of reflection, he began to notice how budgeting wasn't just changing his finances. It was changing him. He started waking up with intention. When he spent, it was with clarity. When he saved, it was with purpose. Even his relationships changed. Conversations about money became honest, not defensive. The fear of not enough started fading, replaced by the calm of just right. Because money, when managed well, stops being a source of stress and becomes a source of freedom. He realized that budgeting is not about perfection. It's about direction. Some months will fail, others will flourish. But as long as one keeps walking, progress never stops. The best budget isn't the most complicated one. It's the one you can stick to. The one that fits your reality, not someone else's. The one that reflects your priorities, not your impulses. He began sharing what he learned with others. Most of them resisted at first. It's too strict, they'd say. I want to live now. But he would smile. You are living now, he'd reply. But wouldn't you rather live with peace than panic? They look at him differently then, realizing budgeting wasn't about cutting joy. It was about protecting it. Because joy that comes with debt is just temporary escape. True joy is built on stability. And stability, like most meaningful things, grows slowly. Budgeting, when done right, doesn't limit you. It liberates you. It gives you permission to enjoy without guilt, to rest without worry, to dream without fear of collapse. That's what freedom feels like, not the rush of buying something new, but the calm of knowing you're prepared for whatever comes next. One evening, as he reviewed his accounts, something unexpected happened. The numbers weren't large, but they told a story, a steady increase in savings, a decrease in unnecessary expenses, a sense of balance. He smiled. Not because he had everything, but because he finally understood what enough meant. Enough wasn't a number. It was a feeling of control, gratitude, and quiet satisfaction. The mentor's words returned once more. Budgeting isn't a cage, it's a compass. And for the first time, he knew exactly where he was headed. Every great change begins with awareness. Every strong foundation begins with discipline. And every life that feels peaceful begins with clarity. Budgeting isn't about denying yourself today. It's about freeing yourself tomorrow. Because wealth isn't built by chance. It's built by choice. By small, consistent, intentional choices that compound into a life of control and calm. So, wherever someone stands today, whether in debt, confusion, or doubt, the first step is the same: awareness. Look closely at where your money goes, and you'll find where your life is headed. Change starts not with income, but with intention. And that's where this story truly begins. He used to think the problem was income. If only he earned more, things would finally make sense. The bills wouldn't feel so heavy. the choices wouldn't feel so tight, and maybe, just maybe, the constant worry would disappear. But with every raise came a new expense, and every promotion brought a new lifestyle. The gap between peace and panic never seemed to close. That's when he began to understand. The problem wasn't how much came in, but how it flowed out. Most people don't realize they're caught in a quiet, invisible cycle. Earn, spend, repeat. Their paychecks don't pass through their hands. They vanish through automation, routine, and emotion. The rent collects itself. The subscriptions renew. The impulses justify themselves. And by the time the month ends, they're right back where they started, tired, confused, and a little ashamed. The tragedy isn't in the lack of money. It's in the lack of awareness. Budgeting matters because it forces awareness, a clear, honest look at how money moves. It transforms vague stress into visible truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, is a beginning of control. He once heard a saying that stayed with him. You can't manage what you don't measure. It's simple but powerful. Most people treat money emotionally, not logically. They buy to feel good, to feel seen, to feel in control. But the feeling fades and the emptiness returns. Budgeting is the opposite of that. It replaces emotion with evidence. It takes what feels chaotic and turns it into something you can understand. When you write down your expenses, you see the truth of your habits, where your impulses hide, where your priorities lie, and where your peace is leaking. That's why budgeting matters. Because without it, you drift. And when you drift financially, you drift emotionally too. You start blaming the economy, your job, the timing of life, anything but your own patterns. But the day you begin tracking, even imperfectly, is the day you begin leading. He remembered the first time he tracked his spending. The number surprised him, not because of one big purchase, but because of the small, daily ones. The things that felt insignificant, coffee, snacks, rides, random apps, had quietly become the thieves of his peace. It's rarely the large decisions that break your finances. It's the daily habits, the unconscious ones, that drain you silently. Budgeting reveals those patterns. It says, this is what you truly value, whether you admit it or not, because what you spend on repeatedly is what you prioritize, even if unintentionally. For many, that realization hurts. But pain is powerful when it teaches. The mentor used to say, money tells the truth we avoid. Budgeting makes us listen. Modern life has made spending effortless. One tap, one click, one auto-renew. The world is designed to separate you from your money as quickly as possible. You don't even feel it leaving, because friction has been removed. Budgeting puts the friction back. It reintroduces thought before action. It forces questions like, do I need this? Can I wait? What's the trade-off? And those questions, small as they seem, change everything. Because once you start asking them, you stop being a consumer and start becoming a creator of plans, of stability, of peace. The world won't slow down. Advertising will only get smarter. Temptation will only get easier. But discipline, that's timeless. It's not about resistance for the sake of denial. It's about redirection for the sake of purpose. There's also pride in the illusion of control. Many people believe they already have a system. They keep a number in their head. They roughly know their limits. They feel when they've spent too much. But feeling isn't knowing, and guessing isn't planning. He once met a friend who said, I don't need a budget. I just use common sense. A month later, that same friend borrowed money to pay his rent. Common sense doesn't work against convenience. Awareness does. Budgeting is the difference between thinking you're in control and actually being in control. But here's the deeper truth. Budgeting matters not just because of money, but because of what money represents. Money reflects responsibility. It reflects foresight. It reflects self-respect. When you budget, you're not just managing finances. You're managing trust. The trust between your present self and your future self. The person who budgets says, I care enough about my future to prepare for it. The one who doesn't says, I'll deal with it later. And later almost always arrives uninvited. Emergencies don't announce themselves. Job losses don't wait for better timing. Life doesn't slow down to let you prepare. Budgeting is how you build that safety net before the fall. It's not about predicting everything. It's about preparing for anything. He used to think of saving as sacrifice. Now, he sees it as strategy. Every dollar saved is a vote for stability. Every planned expense is an act of intention. And over time, those intentions compound, not just in the bank, but in the mind. The person who budgets differently starts to think differently. They pause before reacting. They plan before panicking. This mental shift is the real power of budgeting. It changes the way you make decisions, not just financially, but in every part of life. Because budgeting isn't really about money, it's about clarity. He began noticing patterns in others too. The colleague who upgraded his phone every year but complained about rent. The couple who traveled often but had no emergency fund. The friend who always said, "I deserve it," right before regretting it. The problem wasn't greed, it was confusion. Most people are stuck in a loop of trying to feel rich rather than be stable. They mistake temporary comfort for long-term peace. But the one who learns to delay gratification discovers something profound. Patience creates freedom. Every no today builds a stronger yes tomorrow. That's why budgeting matters. It teaches delayed gratification in a world addicted to instant relief. There's another reason people avoid budgeting. It exposes priorities. You can't say family comes first if your spending says otherwise. You can't say, "I'm serious about growth," while investing nothing in learning. Budgeting confronts the difference between what we say and what we do. And that confrontation is uncomfortable, but necessary. Because peace only comes when your values and your actions align. The moment your money starts serving your principles instead of your impulses, your life begins to change. He often thought about the word enough. It's a small word, but few people ever find it. Most are chasing more income, more comfort, more luxury. But more has no finish line. It keeps moving just ahead, whispering, "Almost there," but never letting you arrive. Budgeting gives enough a definition. It draws boundaries around excess and builds security within simplicity. When you know what's enough for you, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring yourself against others and start measuring progress against your own goals. Budgeting matters because it brings you back to your lane, your pace, your plan, your priorities. He remembered visiting his parents once. His father, who'd never earned a high income, had lived debt-free his entire life. No credit cards, no loans, no splurges. Just steady, consistent planning. At the time, he thought his father was old-fashioned. But later, he realized his father wasn't limited. He was free. He didn't owe anyone. He didn't fear emergencies. He didn't chase status. Budgeting, his father once said, isn't about restriction. It's about respect. Respect for what you've worked for and for the future you haven't met yet. That sentence stayed with him forever. Budgeting matters because it builds something deeper than wealth. It builds character. It teaches humility. You can't have everything at once. It teaches patience. Progress is slow but sure. It teaches responsibility. Your choices ripple into your future. Over time, these lessons bleed into every corner of life. Work, relationships, habits. Because once you learn to manage money, you learn to manage emotion, time, and desire. Budgeting is self-discipline in its most practical form. And yet, the irony is that the people who need it most resist it most. They call it boring, tedious, restrictive. But those same people check their accounts 10 times a month, stressed and uncertain. Freedom doesn't come from avoiding structure. It comes from mastering it. The same way a pilot doesn't fear the cockpit's complexity, a disciplined person doesn't fear their budget. They understand that structure creates safety, and safety creates peace. Budgeting isn't a punishment. It's a form of preparation. Preparation for opportunities, for crises, for dreams. When he began budgeting seriously, he noticed something subtle. His goals became more visible. Before they were vague wishes. I should save more. I want to invest someday. I hope to travel. But when written into a budget, hope became a plan, and a plan became progress. Month after month, small changes compounded. A canceled subscription became a weekly saving. A homemade lunch became a growing balance. Each decision felt small, but together they told a bigger story. Discipline works. He realized that the key wasn't perfection. It was persistence. Some months would fall apart. Unexpected expenses would show up. Mistakes would happen. But budgeting isn't about never failing. It's about never ignoring. You adjust, you learn, you continue. And that resilience, that quiet return to consistency, builds both confidence and peace. There's a calm that comes from knowing where your money is going. It's not just the comfort of having savings. It's the relief of no longer being surprised by your own behavior. You start to feel aligned, balanced, centered. The chaos softens. Budgeting becomes less about numbers and more about rhythm, a monthly ritual of reflection, like checking your compass before another journey. Each time you review your budget, you ask yourself the same question. Am I still moving toward what matters? And if the answer is yes, even by an inch, that's success. In time, he discovered something unexpected. Budgeting brought gratitude. When he knew where every dollar went, he stopped taking money for granted. He appreciated his meals, his home, his simple joys. Spending became intentional, and because of that, joy deepened. He didn't need extravagance anymore. He needed purpose. That's what budgeting gives, not wealth, but worth. The sense that your choices align with your values, that your life isn't being wasted on impulses, that your effort is shaping something meaningful. Budgeting matters because it reconnects you to your effort. It turns your hard work into lasting peace rather than fleeting pleasure. One evening, while reflecting on his journey, he realized something profound. The opposite of budgeting isn't freedom. It's confusion. Confusion about where your money goes. Confusion about where your life is headed. But once you budget, confusion fades and clarity begins. Budgeting isn't about being rich. It's about being ready. Ready for life storms. Ready for opportunity. Ready for peace. And that readiness, quiet, invisible, and powerful, is the foundation of every successful life. Budgeting matters because it's more than a spreadsheet. It's a mindset. It's an act of courage to face your reality and shape it. It's a daily decision to trade impulse for intention, confusion for clarity, and chaos for calm. And somewhere along that journey, you realize money never controlled you. You just hadn't learned how to lead it. He had always assumed that money was logical. Numbers, balances, simple math. How hard could it be? But life had a way of proving him wrong. Every time he tried to stick to a plan, impulses whispered in his ear. Every time he earned a little, urges pulled him away from stability. Slowly, he realized that money was never just about money. It was about desire, fear, identity, and emotion. Most people think their spending is rational. They tell themselves, I need this, or I can afford that. But deep down, they know the truth. Buying doesn't always solve problems. Spending doesn't always bring satisfaction. And yet, humans have been doing it for millennia, trading comfort for momentary relief. It's a behavior rooted in psychology, not logic. He remembered observing his friends, colleagues, and even family members. Some would spend impulsively on gadgets, clothes, or dinners out. Others would hoard every penny in fear of scarcity. And a few would swing between the two extremes. Indulgence followed by regret, panic followed by temporary relief. The patterns were endless, predictable, and revealing. Money is a mirror. It reflects who a person is, what they value, and where they are emotionally. The man who constantly spends to impress others is seeking validation. The person who refuses to spend it all may be clinging to fear or past experiences. The key to understanding one's financial life is understanding one's mind. Every purchase tells a story. Sometimes it's a story of reward, a small celebration of effort, a token of achievement. Other times, it's a story of avoidance, buying to distract, to numb, or to escape. Few people stop to ask themselves why they make these choices. Fewer still look beyond the immediate gratification to see the long-term consequences. The mentor had once said, most people don't control money. They're controlled by it, by their feelings about it. That statement, simple as it was, carried the weight of a lifetime of observation. Emotional spending is invisible. It hides behind convenience, habit, or even culture. Yet it dictates far more than any spreadsheet could reveal. He thought of impulsive purchases, the coffee bought on a whim, the app subscribed to without thought, the unnecessary gadget that promised efficiency but delivered clutter. Each one was tiny on its own, but together they formed a river that carried money away before it could be saved or invested. The river was driven by emotion, desire, boredom, the need for acceptance, the illusion of comfort. Beneath every unplanned purchase lies a trigger. Triggers are subtle. They arrive in the form of advertisements, social media posts, peer pressure, or even internal dialogue. They make a person feel incomplete, restless, or inadequate. And in that moment, spending feels like relief. It feels like control. But it is only temporary. He recalled the psychology of scarcity. People often spend in fear, not because they have plenty, but because they imagine not having enough tomorrow. That fear drives impulsive decisions. It turns necessity into indulgence, and indulgence into regret. The cycle is relentless. Then there is the pleasure principle. The brain is wired to seek immediate reward. Dopamine spikes with every small acquisition. It's addictive, invisible, and profoundly human. Every discount, every limited time offer, every gift card is designed to trigger that response. The modern world amplifies this wiring, making self-discipline feel unnatural. Yet, discipline is exactly what is required. Discipline is not denial, it is awareness. The person who learns to pause before spending rewires the brain, replacing automatic gratification with intentional choice. The first step is noticing the emotions behind each decision: boredom, anxiety, insecurity, desire, and asking, do I truly need this, or am I chasing a feeling? He remembered the friend who would buy expensive sneakers whenever work stress peaked. The shoes brought temporary relief, but once home, the relief faded, leaving guilt behind. Another colleague would indulge in lavish dinners to fill loneliness. Each pattern revealed a mind searching for something money could not permanently provide. Understanding these patterns is crucial. Without understanding, budgeting is mechanical, like filling bottles without knowing what they contain. With understanding, budgeting becomes transformative. It is not about restricting. It is about redirecting. Every dollar becomes a conscious choice aligned with goals, not emotions. The mentor explained that people fall into 3 categories psychologically: spenders, savers, and avoiders. Spenders seek immediate reward. Savers seek security. Avoiders deny awareness, neither saving nor spending consciously. Each has its risks. The spender risks chaos. The saver risks missing life's joys. The avoider risks being unprepared for anything. Awareness, he said, is the key to balance. Impulse control is a skill. And like any skill, it requires practice. It begins with observation. Track the purchases and note the feelings. Write down the reasons. Did the purchase bring happiness or just distraction? Did it solve a problem or create another? Over time, the pattern emerges, patterns that reveal true values and priorities. Fear and desire often work in tandem. Fear of scarcity and desire for comfort push and pull simultaneously, often invisibly. Without reflection, a person is caught in the tug of war, spending when anxious, hoarding when uncertain, and rarely finding balance. Budgeting becomes a psychological tool to navigate this battlefield. The mentor often said, every financial decision is emotional. Every spreadsheet is only as good as the self-awareness behind it. Numbers are neutral. Feelings are not. The person who ignores the emotions behind spending is destined to repeat mistakes, no matter how carefully they plan. He thought about advertising, the subtle, constant bombardment of messages designed to make people feel inadequate, incomplete, or behind. A person scrolls through social media, sees someone else's new phone, new car, or vacation, and a small unconscious craving ignites. Desire masquerades as need. This is why budgeting cannot be just mechanical. It must include reflection. The first question is never, can I afford it? The first question must be, why do I want it? Some people spend to fill emptiness. They chase a feeling of status, achievement, or recognition. They believe possessions signal success, not realizing that confidence cannot be bought. Others spend to numb the stress of work, family, or loneliness. Money becomes a temporary anesthetic. These patterns are human, common, and largely invisible until reflected upon. He realized that emotional spending is not a flaw. It is a signal. It shows what a person values, fears, or lacks. When observed honestly, it becomes a guide, not a trap. It tells a person where attention is needed, which habits to change, and where discipline must be applied. The mentor described budgeting as a mirror of the soul. You will spend in alignment with your priorities, whether you recognize them or not. The first step is to become conscious. Awareness is the master key. He began experimenting. Before each purchase, he would pause. Why am I buying this? Am I hungry, bored, anxious, or genuinely in need? It was awkward at first, almost impossible in a world built for instant reward. But over weeks, he noticed something remarkable. The cravings became weaker, the purchases more intentional, the guilt less frequent. Discipline, he learned, is its own reward. There's also the hidden influence of habit. People repeat patterns unconsciously. They buy the same snack every day, subscribe automatically, spend without thinking. Habits are powerful, far more than sheer willpower. Changing them requires deliberate action, observing, reflecting, replacing, and reinforcing. Budgeting is a structure that allows this transformation. He noticed another pattern. Emotional highs and lows often dictate financial decisions. After a win at work, a person might splurge, convinced they deserve it. After a loss or setback, a person might splurge, seeking comfort. Without reflection, money becomes a lever for emotion, not a tool for life. The psychologically aware budgeter learns to pause, to notice, and to redirect impulses toward long-term goals. Another factor is comparison. Humans are wired to measure themselves against others. In the digital age, comparison is constant. Social media amplifies desire and fuels spending, often in invisible ways. The psychological battle becomes daily, minute by minute. Awareness and discipline are shields against this constant pull. Over time, he began journaling both money and emotion. Every expense included a note, why it was made, what emotion drove it, what effect it had. This simple act illuminated unconscious patterns. Small patterns became visible. Once patterns are visible, they can be adjusted, controlled, and transformed. The mentor once said, emotion without awareness is chaos. Awareness without action is knowledge wasted. Action guided by awareness is mastery. He understood now that budgeting was mastery. Mastery not over numbers, but over impulses, over emotion, over the self. He realized that humans often misinterpret desire as need. The urge to buy, to indulge, to distract, these are natural, but they are not commands. Budgeting is a practice of listening to the urge, understanding it, and choosing consciously. Over time, the difference between desire and necessity becomes clear. People who fail financially are rarely careless. They are reactive, responding to emotions without structure. They act, then regret. The psychologically aware budgeter flips this script. They pause, reflect, and act with intention. Spending becomes an expression of values, not impulses. Fear and temptation do not disappear, but they are understood. Once recognized, triggers lose their power. The craving for instant reward becomes just another signal. What am I really seeking? With practice, impulse weakens, reflection strengthens, and choices align with long-term goals. He learned that every small financial decision is a test of self-awareness. Each dollar spent unconsciously is a victory for emotion over logic. Each dollar spent intentionally is a victory for awareness and mastery. Over time, the victories compound, transforming not just finances but mindset, habits, and life itself. By the end, he realized budgeting is psychology in practice. Numbers are secondary. Discipline is cultivated not by fear or rules, but by understanding oneself. Desires, triggers, emotions, and patterns. Money becomes a tool, not a master. Life becomes intentional, not chaotic. And in that awareness, he found freedom. Not the fleeting pleasure of impulsive spending, but the steady, enduring calm of knowing that every choice supports purpose, every expense reflects values, and every decision is guided by clarity rather than compulsion. He often sat quietly, watching people move through life, and noticed a pattern. Money was never just a tool. It was a reflection of values, choices, and character. The people who worried endlessly about wealth were not necessarily poor, and those who lived comfortably were not always rich. What differentiated them was intention, understanding, and discipline. Money exposed what the heart and mind already carried. In his early years, he chased illusions. He thought wealth meant freedom, Spending meant satisfaction, and indulgence equal happiness. But every time he acquired something, the euphoria was fleeting. Within days, he felt the same restlessness, the same emptiness, the same subtle anxiety. He began to understand that money, without reflection, was a mirror of desire, not a foundation of peace. The mentor had once said, "Money is like water. It takes the shape of the container. If your habits are chaotic, your wealth will be chaotic. If your habits are disciplined, even a little will suffice." Those words lingered, not because they were novel, but because they were true. Discipline and clarity were far more powerful than the raw number in a bank account. He began seeing the world differently. People rushing to buy the latest gadgets were seeking validation. Friends who constantly upgraded cars were pursuing status, not utility. Families who overspent on temporary luxuries were often unconsciously filling emotional gaps. Every decision reflected unseen motivations, a need for recognition, comfort, escape, or self-worth. Philosophically, he realized that money is a test, not of intelligence, but of character. The abundance or scarcity of wealth does not define success. How one interacts with it does. Every paycheck, every purchase, every saving decision is a reflection of self-awareness. It is less about accumulation and more about intention. He remembered a story from a friend who lived modestly despite earning well. Each month, she allocated her income with purpose. Necessities were covered, savings prioritized, indulgences planned. She did not deprive herself, nor did she allow impulse to dominate. Over time, her small, consistent choices accumulated into security, freedom, and quiet joy. She was not extraordinary in earnings, but extraordinary in discipline. It became clear budgeting is not simply about money management. It is about life management. It forces a person to align actions with values. It transforms vague aspirations into concrete steps. It converts anxiety into direction, fear into preparation, and desire into reflection. He thought about the concept of delayed gratification. Most humans struggle with it, yet it is the cornerstone of meaningful financial and personal growth. Small, consistent sacrifices, a coffee foregone here, a subscription canceled there, accumulate into security and opportunity. Every moment of restraint is a seed for future freedom. Philosophically, he saw money as a narrative tool. Every decision tells a story. A person who spends impulsively writes a story of chaos. One who saves consistently writes a story of foresight. One who gives wisely writes a story of compassion. Money does not judge, but it reflects, magnifies, and amplifies the choices we make daily. He recalled another example, a colleague who frequently lamented that life was unfair. She worked hard, earned well, but complained constantly. When she finally tracked her spending, she was shocked. Luxuries consumed nearly half of her income, while her savings were minimal. The problem was never her salary. It was the unconscious alignment of her choices. Tracking, reflection, and intention turned her complaints into action, and action into results. The mentor often emphasized stories like these. Numbers are facts. Stories are lessons. Patterns tell the truth no spreadsheet can reveal. And he began to see the subtle truth. Humans are storytelling creatures. Money is a character in every story, reflecting choices, shaping behavior, and revealing priorities. He noticed another pattern among those who struggle financially: inconsistency. One month they saved diligently. The next they overspent. The philosophy behind their choices was weak. Discipline requires more than awareness. It requires rhythm, habit, and perseverance. Consistency, not intensity, is the engine of meaningful change. He also realized that money exposes emotional biases. Some people equate spending with happiness, believing every acquisition fills a void. Others equate saving with security, fearing deprivation even in abundance. The psychologically aware understand both impulses but act intentionally. They acknowledge desire, recognize fear, and channel both toward long-term goals. He began reflecting on life's impermanence. Wealth can vanish in a day. Opportunities can disappear in an instant. Budgets, discipline, and clarity are philosophical defenses against the unpredictable. They are not guarantees, but preparation. They teach resilience, patience, and foresight, lessons far deeper than any financial statement. Consider the story of a man who lost his job unexpectedly. Those who had disciplined habits, even modest savings, weathered the storm without panic. Those who had spent impulsively struggled, scrambling for solutions and feeling powerless. Money, when managed consciously, transforms uncertainty into confidence. When ignored, it amplifies chaos. He thought of the broader lessons. Budgeting teaches self-awareness. Every decision, to spend, save, or invest, becomes a mirror of one's values, desires, and priorities. It turns abstract goals into tangible steps. It makes a person accountable, disciplined, and reflective. The process itself is as valuable as a result. He also saw the humility in budgeting. Humans overestimate their control, underestimate their impulses, and often believe they are exceptional in restraint. Few are. Recognizing this, acknowledging vulnerability, and designing systems to compensate is both practical and philosophical. Humility and honesty with oneself are the foundations of financial wisdom. Philosophically, he considered money as a tool of freedom. It can enslave or liberate, depending on mastery. Those who chase it blindly are enslaved to desire, comparison, and fear. Those who align it with purpose gain freedom, not just in spending, but in life. The choices become deliberate. The mind becomes calm. The future becomes navigable. He remembered an older mentor who had lived simply but wisely. Wealth is not the amount you hold. Wealth is the clarity and choice it affords. Those words crystallized in his mind. Money, he realized, was an amplifier of character, not a measure of it. Discipline amplifies, chaos diminishes. He began observing everyday examples. A couple meticulously planning their monthly budget lived in harmony, confident in their choices. Another family, spending haphazardly, often argued over money. The difference was not income, but intention. Budgeting is philosophy in practice, a reflection of the mind's order, patience, and foresight. Stories from his own life reinforced these lessons. He recalled moments of impulse and regret, of buying out of boredom or fear. He saw patterns in friends, colleagues, and strangers alike. Money does not discriminate. It only mirrors behavior. Learning to read the mirror is the first step toward mastery. He realized that each dollar carries weight. It represents effort, opportunity, and choice. Spend unconsciously, and it disappears without meaning. Spend intentionally, and it becomes a tool of alignment, security, and progress. This insight, simple yet profound, became a guiding principle. Philosophically, he understood that freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the presence of control. Budgeting constrains nothing it respects. Instead, it liberates thought, stabilizes emotion, and aligns actions. The practice is both practical and moral. It honors effort, rewards discipline, and prepares for uncertainty. He began integrating lessons into daily life. Small reflections before purchases, awareness of impulses, journaling emotional triggers, and tracking habits became rituals. Over time, the rituals built resilience. The seemingly mundane act of budgeting became a meditation, a practice of self-mastery. The most striking realization was this: wealth is secondary. The real gain is mental clarity, emotional stability, and the power to choose. Money in itself is just paper or digits. How it is used, reflected, and aligned determines its value. He recalled relatable examples from everyday life. A friend would spend extravagantly to impress colleagues, only to feel shallow and anxious afterward. Another would deny herself small pleasures, hoarding every penny, only to feel deprived and resentful. Both extremes reveal the importance of balance, reflection, and philosophical perspective. He began to view every financial choice as a story of life itself. Each decision carried lessons: patience, discipline, reflection, humility, and foresight. Money was no longer an end, but a narrative device, a means to understand self-values and priorities. Even small choices mattered. Skipping a coffee, delaying a purchase, prioritizing savings, or investing in knowledge. These seemingly minor acts accumulated into patterns, habits, and ultimately, a philosophy of life. Discipline was cultivated not in grand gestures, but in the sum of countless small, deliberate actions. Philosophically, he also pondered contentment. Society equates abundance with happiness, But true satisfaction emerges from alignment, not excess. Budgeting is a tool that fosters alignment between income and values, between desire and purpose, between action and reflection. He remembered an encounter with a colleague who spent lavishly yet felt anxious every month. When guided to journal her expenditures and motives, she discovered patterns: spending to impress, spending to avoid stress, spending to chase fleeting joy. Awareness alone shifted behavior. Action built consistency. Over months, stability replaced anxiety. It became evident. Philosophy and practice are inseparable. Awareness of mind and emotion informs budgeting. Consistent action translates philosophy into tangible results. Reflection ensures that spending aligns with values. Each dollar becomes intentional. Each habit becomes a testament to self-mastery. He realized a profound truth. Money in itself is neutral. It does not create stress or peace. It amplifies the qualities of the mind that controls it. Discipline generates freedom. Chaos generates fear. Awareness generates clarity. Neglect generates regret. In the quiet moments of reflection, he observed that true wealth is not accumulation, but alignment. The person who spends intentionally, saves consistently, and understands motivations lives richer than the one who earns more but lacks discipline. The external measure is secondary. The internal measure, clarity, self-control, and alignment, is primary. He also noted the importance of narrative. Financial choices are not isolated events. They form a story. Some stories are chaotic, reactive, and fearful. Others are deliberate, reflective, and purposeful. Reading the narrative, adjusting the script, and directing the plot is the essence of financial philosophy in practice. And in that practice, he found calm, not the exhilaration of impulsive purchase, nor the fleeting pride of accumulation, but the quiet certainty that choices were aligned, values honored, and future secured. Budgeting, when fused with reflection and philosophy, becomes a path to mastery, not just of money, but of life. He had learned much about money, the psychology, the philosophy, the emotions that tug at the heart and mind. Yet knowledge alone was insufficient. Awareness without action is like a ship anchored in calm waters, safe but stagnant. The next step was clear. Transform insight into practical habit, reflection into daily action, and philosophy into discipline. The first insight was deceptively simple. Tracking is the foundation of control. He began documenting every penny, not to judge himself, but to understand patterns. The initial exercise was humbling. Small, repeated expenses, the coffee, the snacks, the subscriptions, revealed themselves as silent drains on his resources. Awareness alone changed behavior. Seeing money leave allowed him to anticipate, redirect, and decide. Budgeting is not a spreadsheet exercise. It is a discipline of the mind. The daily act of logging expenses, reviewing needs, and planning for future costs cultivates mindfulness. Each transaction becomes a deliberate choice rather than an unconscious habit. The person who budgets in this way is training not just finances, but character. He established a simple rule. Every expense must serve a purpose. Necessity, growth, or measured enjoyment. Anything else was deferred. This mental filter transformed decision-making. Impulse weakened, reflection strengthened, and over time, what felt like restriction became freedom. Choosing deliberately, rather than reacting emotionally, created clarity and peace. Next came the creation of categories. Money is chaotic when undirected. He divided his income into allocations: essentials, savings, growth, and discretionary. Essentials included rent, utilities, groceries, unavoidable but manageable. Savings became a non-negotiable category, automated and consistent. Growth covered personal development, learning, and investments. Discretionary spending, the smallest portion, was used consciously for enjoyment without guilt. Automation became an ally. Bills were scheduled, savings transferred automatically, and investment contributions set up monthly. This removed the temptation to delay or divert funds. Human nature is reactive. Systems create discipline. By structuring money flow, he minimized reliance on willpower, allowing consistency to flourish effortlessly. He also embraced the principle of pay yourself first. Before spending on anything else, a portion of income went to savings and investments. It was a simple yet profound shift. Instead of saving what was left over, he prioritized the future over immediate indulgence. This mindset created security and transformed anxiety into confidence. Emergencies are inevitable, yet most people are unprepared. He established an emergency fund, a financial cushion sufficient to cover several months of essential expenses. The goal was not luxury, but protection. This fund became a mental safety net, allowing measured risk-taking, freedom of choice, and calm in crises. Daily habits matter as much as strategy. He learned to practice small, consistent behaviors, checking balances every morning, planning meals to avoid waste, negotiating bills, avoiding unnecessary subscriptions, and delaying purchases. Each act reinforced discipline, slowly building momentum. Small habits compound over time, creating structural stability without requiring drastic lifestyle changes. Mindset shifts were equally crucial. He adopted the philosophy that every dollar spent was a vote for values, priorities, and future self. Spending unconsciously undermined goals. Spending deliberately reinforced them. This simple perspective converted financial decisions from passive acts into expressions of intentionality. He also recognized temptation as inevitable. Modern life is designed to encourage impulsive spending. Retailers, advertisers, social media, all amplify desire. He developed mental strategies, waiting periods before major purchases, questioning motives, and prioritizing needs over fleeting wants. Desire was acknowledged, not suppressed, but disciplined. Investing in knowledge became a priority. He allocated funds for personal growth, books, courses, mentorship, understanding that human capital compounds faster than money. Discipline in financial learning reinforced financial discipline in action. A person who understands principles of wealth is less likely to be swayed by impulses or trends. He implemented a weekly review ritual. Every Sunday, he assessed income, spending, savings, and goals. He noted patterns, adjusted allocations, and reflected on emotional triggers. This practice transformed budgeting from mechanical task to conscious ritual, a personal dialogue with values, priorities, and intentions. Psychology, he realized, was as important as mathematics. Habits are emotional in nature. Fear, desire, anxiety, boredom all influence decisions. Discipline without understanding the emotional undercurrents fails. Therefore, he cultivated self-awareness alongside structure. Journaling emotional responses to spending became as important as tracking dollars. He also adopted the principle of delayed gratification rigorously. Large purchases were postponed, discussed, and considered. Impulse decisions were replaced by thoughtful reflection. This practice strengthened self-control, increased satisfaction in purchases, and reduced regret. The mind becomes trained to resist fleeting pleasures for enduring stability. He developed visual cues to reinforce habits. Savings goals were displayed, progress charts tracked, and reminders placed in visible spaces. Visual reinforcement creates focus, accountability, and motivation. The brain responds to tangible feedback more effectively than abstract intentions. Debt management became critical. He prioritized paying off high-interest obligations first, understanding that uncontrolled debt undermines both finances and psychology. Reducing debt frees not only money but mental space, reducing stress and increasing clarity. Borrowing was reframed, only for strategic, purposeful reasons, never for impulsive gratification. Budgeting also included intentional giving, allocating funds to others, family, charity, or causes, reinforced perspective. It counterbalanced material focus, promoted gratitude, and cultivated a sense of purpose beyond consumption. Purpose-driven allocation strengthens financial discipline, making each dollar feel meaningful rather than arbitrary. He implemented practical mental shifts. Money is a tool, not an end. Small daily actions compound into significant outcomes. Awareness transforms impulse into choice. Consistency outweighs intensity. Preparation reduces fear. Delayed gratification strengthens freedom. Each principle is reinforced daily through habit, reflection, and accountability. Mastery was gradual, but inevitable. He also learned to simplify. Complexity invites error and stress. Simplified accounts, clear categories, automatic transfers, and minimalistic goals reduce friction. Simplicity allowed focus on meaningful decisions rather than mechanical management. The fewer decisions wasted on minor details, the more energy remained for intentional action. Mindset became a compass. Discipline is rarely enjoyable initially, but the long-term satisfaction outweighs short-term comfort. He reframed restriction as choice, sacrifice as strategy, and budgeting as empowerment. Each conscious decision reinforced identity, disciplined, intentional, and aligned with long-term goals. He reflected on realistic expectations. Life is unpredictable. Income fluctuates. Expenses arise unexpectedly. Discipline does not mean perfection, but resilience. Budgeting is adaptive. Systems must be flexible, habits must adjust, and mindset must remain committed to long-term vision. He emphasized tracking progress visually. Graphs, charts, and journals turn abstract goals into tangible milestones. Progress becomes motivating, mistakes become learning opportunities, and success becomes measurable. Motivation thrives on visible feedback. He created rules for discretionary spending. Fun was permitted, but only within predefined limits. This removed guilt while reinforcing boundaries. Pleasure, when disciplined, becomes sustainable rather than destructive. Small, intentional indulgences satisfy desire without undermining goals. Automation, habit reflection, and discipline merge into a seamless practice. Financial control became mental clarity. The act of budgeting was no longer tedious. It became a ritual, a conversation with self, and a source of empowerment. Every dollar had intention. Every habit had purpose. Every choice reflected identity. He discovered that practical insight was inseparable from philosophy. Budgeting is not simply accounting. It is the manifestation of values into daily practice. It is the alignment of mind, emotion, and action. It converts anxiety into control, desire into choice, and complexity into clarity. The mentor's advice resonated through these practices. Structure creates freedom. Habit creates momentum. Awareness creates mastery. Each principle reinforced the other. Over months, the habits built themselves into an internal framework. Discipline became instinct. Reflection became natural. Awareness became second nature. He also noted the power of incremental improvement. Massive, sudden changes fail. Small, consistent adjustments succeed. Skipping one coffee a week, delaying one unnecessary purchase, slightly increasing savings each month. Each small action compounds. Discipline is not dramatic. It is consistent. Mastery is cumulative. He used mental exercises to reinforce control. Before each decision, he paused. Do I need this? Will it help me tomorrow? Does it align with my values? These simple questions, repeated daily, retrained the brain. Desire lost dominance. Awareness gained strength. Habits became deliberate. Decisions became purposeful. Over time, budgeting ceased to feel restrictive. It became liberating. Money no longer dictated mood, options, or peace. Control shifted from impulse to intention. Anxiety was replaced by clarity. Planning replaced panic. Choice replaced reaction. He realized finally, budgeting is both practical and philosophical. It combines systems, habits, and discipline with self-awareness, reflection, and purpose. It is a life practice as much as a financial one. Those who embrace it gain not just stability, but mastery over money, decisions, and ultimately, themselves. Budgeting is daily practice. It is simple in concept, difficult in execution, and transformative in effect. Discipline builds quietly. Awareness sharpens subtly. Action compounds relentlessly. And in the end, the person who masters these habits does not just survive. They thrive, with freedom, clarity, and purpose guiding every choice. He sat quietly, letting the lessons of months settle like soft sediment in a river. Money, desire, fear, discipline, and habit all have been explored, understood, and transformed through practice. Yet, he realized the journey was never truly about money. It was about life, character, and choice. Each dollar was a whisper, a reflection, a reminder. Each habit was a footprint on the path of self-mastery. In the stillness, he reflected on the simple truths that had emerged. Life is fleeting, time is limited, and control is an illusion until disciplined. The people who seemed free were not those with endless wealth, but those who had learned to align action with intention, desire with reflection, and habit with purpose. Money had become secondary, a tool, a reflection of inner mastery rather than the master itself. He thought about the countless moments where impulsive choices had led to regret, a late-night purchase that brought only temporary pleasure, a debt that carried anxiety long after the thrill of spending faded. The patterns had been repeated by friends, colleagues, even family, and yet he also recognized the beauty of transformation. Awareness, once cultivated, allows the mind to see clearly, to act intentionally, and to navigate life with purpose. Philosophically, he understood that life is a series of choices, some small, some monumental. The dollar spent, the habit formed, the decision delayed, all were threads in the tapestry of destiny. Each choice, however mundane, had weight. Each action, no matter how minor, shaped future freedom. And within this structured choice, discipline became both sword and shield. It cut through chaos. It defended against regret. It built a sanctuary of clarity within a storm of impulse. He remembered the mentor's words. The measure of a person is not in their possessions, but in their alignment. Wealth without awareness is burden. Discipline without purpose is hollow. Action without reflection is wasted energy. Mastery lies at the intersection of all three. Those words resonated deeply. He had seen them play out in real lives, in quiet victories, and in subtle defeats. They were timeless truths, simple yet profound. In reflection, he realized that budgeting is a form of self-respect. It honors effort, acknowledges reality, and prepares for uncertainty. To allocate, plan, and track is to say, I value my time, my work, my choices. Every disciplined act is a statement of identity, a quiet declaration that life will not be dictated by whim, impulse, or fear. Each choice reflects the person he strives to become, deliberate, aware, intentional. He considered freedom. Many equate freedom with spending, indulgence, or the absence of constraints. But true freedom is a power to choose without anxiety, to act without compulsion, to live without regret. Money, when disciplined, facilitates this freedom. Habit, when consistent, maintains it. Awareness, when cultivated, ensures it. Together, they create a life where choice is sovereign, not circumstance. Even in mistakes, there was wisdom. He had observed friends squander opportunities, overspend, and succumb to emotional impulses. And yet he knew each mistake contained a lesson. Notice patterns, reflect honestly, adjust systems. Financial missteps are not failures if they teach awareness, resilience, and prudence. Growth is born not from perfection, but from a willingness to learn, adapt, and persist. He pondered the rhythm of daily life. Small actions accumulate into destiny. A dollar saved, a habit reinforced, a reflection noted. Seemingly trivial, yet inexorably powerful. Like water carving stone, repeated intentional acts shape character, stability, and freedom. The ordinary becomes extraordinary through discipline applied consistently over time. He recalled those who live without structure, impulsive, reactive, and anxious. Their lives were dominated by external forces, temptation, advertising, comparison, and fear. In contrast, those who practice awareness, habit, and intention move through life like seasoned sailors, navigating storms with calm confidence and clarity. Budgeting, discipline, and reflection were the tools of navigation, not the destination itself. Philosophically, he saw money as a mirror of self. Every transaction revealed priorities, values, and emotional tendencies. Every saved dollar reflected foresight. Every intentional investment expressed trust in the future. Every delayed gratification testified to discipline. In observing money, one observes the mind, heart, and spirit, the intertwined threads that create the fabric of life. He also understood impermanence. Circumstances change, income fluctuates, desires shift. Systems provide stability in a transient world. Habits create continuity where chaos threatens. Awareness ensures decisions remain aligned with purpose despite unpredictability. Financial mastery, therefore, is inseparable from life mastery, a continuous practice of alignment, reflection, and deliberate action. He thought about the quiet moments, the mornings reviewing spending, the evenings reflecting on decisions, the weekly rituals of adjustment. These moments were not tedious. They were sacred. They were the spaces where discipline met mindfulness, where intention shaped action, and where life became navigable rather than reactive. The ordinary routines carried profound consequences when approached with consciousness. Giving became part of the equation. To allocate resources intentionally for others, family, friends, causes, was to recognize abundance beyond self. Generosity cultivated gratitude, perspective, and connection. Discipline was not self-centered. It encompassed a broader philosophy of purpose, care, and integrity. Every intentional act of giving strengthened resolve, refined priorities, and reinforced values. He realized the ultimate truth. Mastery is cumulative. It is not dramatic, sudden, or flashy. It grows quietly, invisibly, like roots forming beneath the soil before the tree reaches sunlight. Each act of discipline, reflection, and awareness is a root. Each choice aligned with purpose nourishes growth. Over time, the foundation becomes unshakable. Wealth, freedom, and clarity are byproducts of consistent, intentional practice. He reflected on the serenity that emerges from alignment. Anxiety fades when preparation replaces fear. Desire loses control when awareness guides impulse. Regret diminishes when intention precedes action. The mind, once scattered, becomes a calm vessel. The heart, once restless, finds contentment. Life, once reactive, becomes deliberate. These are the fruits of disciplined practice with reflection, purpose, and patience. He pondered legacy. Financial choices are temporary, but habits endure. Discipline, reflection, and mindfulness transcend circumstances. They shape identity, influence those around, and ripple across generations. Teaching others to act intentionally, manage resources wisely, and cultivate awareness creates impact beyond the individual, a quiet, enduring form of wealth. Even pleasure, once impulsive, could now be intentional. He allowed small joys, a meaningful dinner, a personal treat, or a learning experience. But each was weighed, reflected upon, and aligned with purpose. Freedom is not deprivation. It is conscious choice. Pleasure, when disciplined, enriches life without undermining stability. He considered fear. Financial fear, uncertainty, and anxiety had dominated his early life. But through systems, habits, and reflection, fear transformed into clarity. Risk became manageable, choices deliberate, and life navigable. Discipline does not eliminate challenges, but equips the mind and spirit to face them with calm, strategy, and resilience. He understood contentment. Wealth is not in excess, but in sufficiency aligned with values. Happiness is not in indulgence, but in choice. Freedom is not in abundance, but in mastery. Financial wisdom, cultivated through practice and reflection, becomes a pathway to inner peace, a rare and profound freedom that transcends numbers and circumstance. And finally, he realized that life is cyclical. Challenges arise. Temptations beckon. Desires fluctuate. Yet the practice continues. Awareness guides, habit reinforces, and discipline stabilizes. Money, psychology, philosophy, and action converge into a seamless practice, a lifelong journey of mastery, not just of finance, but of self. He leaned back, feeling a profound quietness. The lessons were clear. Act intentionally, reflect continuously, and cultivate habits that serve purpose. Every dollar spent, every decision made, every habit reinforced is a statement of identity. Each is a step toward freedom, clarity, and alignment. Money is the instrument, discipline is the melody, and reflection is the harmony. Together, they compose a life both practical and poetic, resilient and serene, grounded and free. In the end, he understood the journey is endless. Each day offers new opportunities to align, to act consciously, and to refine mastery. Money is never just money. It is reflection, discipline, and expression. It is a mirror of self and a tool of freedom. Those who embrace it with awareness, patience, and purpose do more than manage finances. They shape destiny, craft character, and cultivate enduring peace. And as the sun set, painting the world in soft amber, he smiled quietly. Life, like money, is fleeting. Yet, through reflection, discipline, and conscious action, one can navigate its currents, steer with purpose, and arrive at the calm shore of mastery, contentment, and freedom.